Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome the audience and the commission and all of the stakeholders to, I was reminded by our secretary that it is Monday, April 15th, and this is our regular session for the Speedway Redevelopment Commission meeting. The appropriate notice was posted, and at the present time, I'd like to introduce everyone here at the front table. Immediately to my right is Gordon Rundle, he's a commission member. Immediately to my left is Brody Duncan. He's the vice president of the commission. To his left is Rhonda Schwartz, secretary of the commission. And then on my far left is Dr. Terry Reed. He represents the Speedway School Corporation and a member of the commission. On my far right is Mr. Tim Gropp, who is the Speedway Economic and Redevelopment Director, if I'm not mistaken. I know you've taken on an awful lot of additional responsibilities. Also in the audience we have Tim Ramian, who's our Executive Assistant and Property Manager and kind of a jack of all trades. He's been given an awful lot of additional responsibilities since he's come on staff. So I'd like to welcome everyone. Now at this point I'd like to open up the lectern to any public comments that anyone in the audience would like to make. Anybody interested in making some comments? I hear nothing, and I see a lot of heads shaking negatively, so let's proceed to the next agenda item. And the next agenda item will address our meeting minutes from the March 18th regular SRC session. And those had not been previously distributed, but I think that we've all had an opportunity to review those. And if you'd like to take an extra moment or so to see if there are any suggested edits or corrections.
Dr. Reed, did you get a
They're fine.
good chance on their grammatical
No, I didn't
presentation there?
It looks good to me.
Well, hearing from Dr. Reed, our editor extraordinaire, I will entertain a motion to accept the meeting minutes from the Speedway Redevelopment Commission meeting of March 18th, 2019.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to consent to the meeting minutes for the regular session dated March 18th, 2019.
All right, I have a motion on the table. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Any items that might have been overlooked? Well, hearing none, let's go ahead and take it to a vote. All those in favor of accepting the minutes that have been distributed, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion passes 4-0. Thank you very much. Now we're going to move on to the claims of expenses for the Speedway Redevelopment Commission. And those had been previously distributed, and I believe we also have those in our meeting packets. Tim, I'll just ask you if there's anything unusual out of the ordinary that you would like to discuss and inform the commission and the audience.
Yeah, you'll see some property tax bills for the Bernard Zellman Living Trust. Part of our agreement, we have a purchase option on that property. Part of that agreement contemplated us paying the property taxes. Mr. Zellman ended up paying them, not realizing that was part of the agreement last year. His daughter that we worked through, his attorney happened to be looking at the agreement and noticed that. So that is the 2018 taxes from last year in full. We're reimbursing for those, and then that is the first spring property tax amount for 2019, which should be incentive. This is unlike our monthly rent that comes off the purchase price. This does not, so that might be our incentive to try and wrap that thing up sooner than later.
Okay.
Beyond that, everything's pretty much monthly bills as usual, other than there was another payment on the Economic Development Strategic Plan, and that was about it.
Okay. Does anybody have any further questions of Tim concerning the listing of the expenses?
In reference to that tax payment, does that reflect the fact that the property's been demolished?
I'd have to go back and look and see what the assessment is.
I don't know if we could
It's
just
a good question.
appeal it.
Good.
That's an excellent point, Brody. Thank you.
That's
Any
a good
additional
point.
questions? Well, hearing none, I will accept a motion to accept the Register of Claims as submitted.
Mr. President, I move that we accept the claims as submitted.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? Let's take it to a vote. All those in favor of the motion on the table, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion passes 4-0. Thank you. All right, let's move on to our project updates. And the first project update we have on our agenda is the Wilshaw project. And I believe we have Mr. David Rainey, who's with the Veritas Group here, to give us an update on that project. And it's always good to see you, David.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. Thank you. So for the apartments, we'll go there first. I did talk to Mr. Hitchcock today, and he did not have the current update today, but as of the last numbers, they have 13 leases at the apartments. That's great. They're steadily increasing. So hopefully what he gets today will add a few more to that. So talked with CRG as well. They're in the process of turning over the last few apartments in the south building, so work's finishing up on the interior. If you notice, they're doing a lot of work on Main Street there as far as the sidewalks. So we've identified a lot of areas that have been cracked, damaged sidewalks due to construction. All that's being tore out and replaced, appropriate subgrades being put in and compacted. So hopefully we have some good sidewalks there for a long time. There will be, they are waiting on an update from the landscape and the architect as far as some benches and footings that are going in. So there might be a slight pause in some of that work. They don't want to get too far ahead of themselves, but that should be completed here probably within the next 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks. And actually, they're telling me that really all exterior work, including painting, hopefully will be done within the next 2.5 weeks. Once that's done, then really the only thing left for them to get their permanent CO is landscaping, which they're telling me that will be done before the race. All this, of course, is weather permitting, but there should be plenty of time before that to get all the landscaping in. So,
David, question. When you talk about the race, is that the Indy Grand Prix or is it the Indianapolis 500?
Indianapolis 500
Oh, okay.
is the goal that they're shooting for.
Okay.
So, yeah. And I'll keep you updated as far as the landscaping but I don't foresee there's really not that much landscaping out there to do, so I don't foresee any issues with them getting that completed in time. As far as the hotel, as you can see, driving by, there's a lot of work going on. They're still working on that main core structure. They plan on pouring the last piece of that to top that out this week. So once that's done, then they'll wreck those forms and go ahead and start on the second core structure to the east of that, and that's the elevator core structure. And then they're going to continue, once they get that up, then they'll continue with the foundations, footings and foundations on the south side of the building. All the foundations on the west side and on the north side are done. They were actually waterproofing that today. So they're moving right along. They're telling me that within the next 2 weeks, within the next month, they plan on having all the footings and foundations completed, as well as that core structure. We should expect to see structural steel starting in the next 2 weeks, so that'll be nice. So things are moving along very well. I think Wilhelm has done a fantastic job keeping the site clean. I made that comment today when I was out there with them for the amount of activity they have going on. They're doing a great job. There's the drive aisle between the two gates that we have asked them to make sure to keep open for any emergencies. Should fire or any type of emergency vehicle need to get through to the apartments. They've been doing a great job of keeping that clear, so we certainly appreciate that. Finally, I spoke to Brandon Burke with Loftus Robinson today as well. We've asked them to provide us with some samples for the hotel brick, some of the aluminum for the louvers, et cetera, just anything they can get us. They've got several boards that they have put together. They're preparing to get those turned over to us. They're currently coordinating with Hilton just to make sure that they've got all final approvals buttoned up, which I appreciate that. I don't want them to show us something that isn't approved by Hilton, and that would just be problematic, to say the least. So, so that's, hopefully we'll have something on that very soon.
Just to clarify that point, so to make sure everyone's comfortable with the brick color and the materials on the exterior, we're going to have these boards in my office, so all of you will be available to come by and see exactly what the exterior is going to look like before we get too far down the road. Like Dave said, if Hilton's
Right.
on board, we should be pretty good as well, so that it's good that they're getting that approval. But we wanted to make sure, so there's no confusion later on down the project, everyone gets a chance to look at it and know exactly what's going to be on the exterior.
And we've also asked them to update the renderings as well, the elevations, so that we can view those as well. So, okay. Does anybody have any questions?
No, I don't believe so. I certainly appreciate the update, David.
Not a problem.
We did go to the BZA 2 weeks ago and got the approvals needed for the triangle parking lot that the SRC continues to own, but will be leased as part of this project for hotel parking only.
Right. And I guess one other point with regard to parking, potentially here within the next week, we'll have a contractor out running some electric to get us some power for the public parking sign on Main Street. So that work should be starting here soon as well.
Yeah, and that'll be an SRC sign that we've added. We felt that it needed to be a little more prominent of a sign on Main Street to guide people in, so that was an expense we were willing to pick up versus the pole that's there now, which is fine, but you don't notice it till you drive past it, so. This will be a light-up sign that it's double-sided and allows people to know it's coming.
So,
Great.
all right.
Any last questions for David? Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right, the next item of our project updates deals with the 2500 North High School Road project, and I'll pass that on to Mr.
I
Gropp.
think if you're all right, Mr. President, we could push that back to Resolution 2019-3.
Let's
Do the
delay
update
this
then.
until we get to the resolution 2019-03. Then that moves us to the 1300 block redevelopment project. Mr. Gropp.
All right. The developer is starting to move forward with some of their marketing, still working out some details, but there was a sign that went up today. We are going to move that sign over a little bit, just for everyone's reference. It's in the parking lot right now. We're going to put it in the gravel. We wanted to get as much exposure prior to the Indy Mini, as well as all the events in May, so they have hired a broker who has put together a marketing sheet, and that should go out hopefully the end of the week to start promoting the building, trying to do some pre-leasing prior to signing anything. So I'd like to have the building as leased as possible. They are also using a different real estate group to promote the condos that will be there as well. So they'll be promoting those as well. Beyond that, we're going to hopefully start putting together some of the outline of the deal and negotiate some of that here real soon. We'd still like to see some progress done by the end of the year if possible.
Anybody have any follow-up questions for Tim regarding 1300 block? Great.
We still don't have firm dates on the environmental cleanup, although I feel like we're making some progress there, as well as when Auto Tech will be moving off of Main Street as well. We've heard the end of April, but we shall see.
Okay. Thank you, Tim. Then the last project update is the 4501 West 16th Street project. I know that we have finally gotten the building demolished. The tanks had been previously removed. Any further updates on that project?
It just ended up being a good redevelopment project. As you mentioned, we had done a real extensive phase 2, found some old tanks from when it was a gas station, got those out of the ground, and then when we were demoing the foundation, we found a couple auto lifts that were unknown, that were under the concrete, and they had just concrete right over, pulled those out along with a hydraulic tank. So really took a property that had been sitting there a while and was able to clean it up. We still have some cleanup on the site to do. It's still pretty messy at this point, but we'll get that tightened up over the next few weeks here. And if you haven't noticed, there is a coffee vendor out there now, River West Coffee and Tea Company, is officially on the site. Has gotten good press so far, but they are open for business, and we're happy they're there, and everybody seems to enjoy it so far.
And then at some point, I believe late summer, early fall, the billboard signage will be removed as a condition of the previous agreement.
Yeah, so we have terminated that contract officially. It officially ends May 1st, and then they have 120 days after that to remove the sign.
Okay.
So I wouldn't anticipate it coming down any sooner than the 120 days.
Particularly with the new sign that was just put up.
Correct.
Correct, okay. Any additional questions of Tim? Okay. Well, let's move on to our new business, and before we discuss the resolution 2019-02, I would like to introduce Courtney Zog. Courtney has been our lead consultant with the Veritas Group in assisting the town and the steering committee in preparing our final draft of the Speedway Economic Development Strategic Plan. So Courtney, I know you've got some comments you'd like to make, a good overview, and also a slide presentation.
We do have a slide. So thank you again for having us tonight. Again, my name's Courtney Zog, and I facilitated the strategic planning process. With us are our partners with Context Design, Joan Mays, and also we had SLE Analytics who did the data analysis. Tonight I'm going to just talk briefly through the process, talk a little bit about the high-level recommendations and the next steps. So I think we'll go to the next slide, talk about the scope. Next slide. Yep. Okay, so we started and launched, believe it was December of last year, where we established the steering committee made up of public officials, volunteers, business community members, economic development representatives, and then we defined when we would meet. So typically we met about every other week in person as needed. Through the holidays, obviously that was a little bit challenging, but we started the quantitative analysis early and then really hit the ground running with the interviews and focus groups and the qualitative analysis starting in January. The items listed there indicate all of the items that are required by OCRA. OCRA is the body that will be submitting the strategic plan on behalf of the town of Speedway. And so these are the sections of the report that we needed to include, including a lot of data analysis there. You can see an evaluation of existing conditions, community assets assessments. Dr. Reed, you have to excuse me. I did find typos in the presentation, and I'll fix them, so forgive me for that. We had the economic opportunities. Again, a lot of this had to do with data analysis on industry, workforce, retail, and even housing. But there were also considerations done by Context regarding things like land use, your corridors, your gateways and entryways. The development opportunities assessment, and then all of that built into the overall economic development vision and strategies. At the end of that, we have an action matrix, and this outlines, and we'll go through it in a little bit, each individual strategy. It talks about what partners need to be involved, who needs to be leading the effort, potential funding strategies, what metrics potentially you could use, things of that sort. All of that will be wrapped up in a final bow here very shortly. So the report is by all means finished, except for a few tweaks here or there, maybe some pictures that need to be added moving forward. So next slide. So as a part of the discussions with the steering committee, we really wanted to merge two kind of main buckets where you have these very big ideas based on what the community itself said are really needs and desires, but also what are the emerging trends happening and how do we merge those two? So these big ideas, so the redevelopment of the shopping center, autonomous vehicle testing, creation of an innovation district, redeveloping the town center, and then targeted redevelopment areas along High School Road and Lyndhurst, all of those are meant to really help Speedway plant a stake in the ground, affirm your identity, and help create a kind of a better marketing pitch for attracting people and business and to grow your own businesses here as well. So with that, we marry that with the next slide, which talks about the action items. These are individual strategies, and I'm not going to go through each one, but they're individual strategies that are much more practical. Some of them simply identify what currently is going on and what good work is happening that maybe need a little more emphasis. Maybe there needs to be additional capacity, maybe volunteers, maybe it needs to be prioritized amongst other strategies going on, economic development strategies in the town. But they're much more, I would say, practical. Then you marry them with the big ideas, and that's really where the magic's going to happen when you're implementing the strategic plan. So in regards to these action items, this is just the immediate action items. There's about 20. I think there's more than 20. We've divided them into immediate section, medium section, and a long term. So instead of saying, okay, you're going to do, let's say there are 50 strategies. There are not. Let's say there are 50 strategies. It becomes overwhelming as to what you should do first. So we've made a list with the steering committee to prioritize what needs to happen in the first 12 to 18 months. This is the list, and actually it goes on the next 2 slides as well. What we would recommend is actually making a shorter list of this item and really focusing your efforts for the next 6 to 9 months on those 5 to 10 things. I did not list the medium and long term because I wanted just to show an example. But this tool, it's in a Excel workbook, is meant for the Tim, staff, officials to use and to track progress. So, for example, if you're going to be meeting quarterly with certain businesses or with certain organizations, you can track that progress. You can make notes and say, here's what was discussed, here are the follow-up items, here's who is responsible. It's an easy tool, but it's something that we found that our clients really appreciate. Also, it is a requirement within the OCRA submission. Are there any questions regarding that? Okay, we'll go to the next couple slides. So more of the immediate action items. And then last is the timeline and next steps. So this talks again about how things have gone. I will say the document is a large document, and I don't want you to get overwhelmed with that. I want you to certainly just pay attention mostly for the big ideas and the recommendations. It's very easy to get lost in the data. So we've really tried to separate as much as possible to put the data where it needs to be, maybe more towards the appendix, so that you can see that information was critical for us to develop these recommendations and strategies. But please don't get lost in the data, and please don't get lost in how big the document is. Just pay attention to the recommendations up front. I'll also say that normally a strategic plan like this takes about a year, and it's been less than 6 months. So we've tried very hard to hit the deadlines. We've had great involvement from the steering committee. I'm so appreciative of your effort. There's a lot of communities that don't put in that type of effort and work, and I really appreciate that. It's not always that you have great clients in town, so thank you. Also, we've had a tremendous response from the community at large. This online survey, actually we had paper surveys as well. We had over 800 people, which I've never had that type of response rate ever. So congratulations. I think it really shows that the community cares and they're involved and they want to see good things happen, and they're not complacent. So that's really great to know. So the next steps would be, once we make a few tweaks to the final report, we'll go to council sometime in May. We'll make a few more edits, and then we'll submit that in June. Submit to OCRA in June. Once OCRA reviews it, they'll provide their comments to us, and then we'll do kind of a final approval in August. Are there any questions or comments? Joe, did you have some thoughts too you wanted to share? I'm going to put you on the spot.
Well, Courtney, I just want to thank you personally and also Joe and the rest of the consultants involved. Brody and I had served on the steering committee along with Tim and other town officials, and I thought that process worked exceptionally well. Some rather significant recommendations, some significant big ideas, and I know we were talking earlier, it's going to take a commitment by a lot of resources, not just town resources, but potentially outside consultants. And I think that's where our primary challenge is going to be, is to really take this list, particularly the immediate items, and paring those down to what is manageable. But I did want to thank the staff, as well as our consultants in compiling a, rather comprehensive strategic plan at this stage, understanding that, it's substantially complete, but there may be some minor edits.
Minor tweaks, yep.
Anybody have any further questions for Courtney? Well, thank you very much, Courtney. I
Thank you.
appreciate that presentation.
Appreciate it.
Well done.
Make sure we thank Luke Bickle, who, for the school board, who spent a lot of time and effort and was really responsive to everything. He was on the steering committee along with town manager Jacob Blaisdell, and then Eileen Fisher and Jeff Matthews from the town council.
And that did comprise our steering committee, and everybody was very much engaged, and thank you for that reminder. Not only have the secretary reminding me what day it is, I also have Tim reminding me who all was involved, and I need that backup. I really appreciate it. So that leads us to the consideration of the resolution that is before us, and that's Resolution 2019-02, and it's a resolution of the Speedway Redevelopment Commission, which approves the Economic Development Strategic Plan that Courtney had just given us a good overview on. I know everybody's had, the full text that was distributed prior to our meeting. I know it's a rather extensive document, but I think we've all had a good opportunity to learn about the strategic plan, particularly with the joint meeting that we had with the town council. So, anybody have any further questions of Tim or me before I entertain a motion to accept the resolution that is before us?
Just two quick notes. Well, I always like to remind everybody that an economic development strategic plan is a living document. There will be changes, there will be things that get amended. So this is the starting point. It's a good starting point, but it will have, it'll live and breathe over the course of the next several years as we try to implement it and work with it. And the other one is, following our recommendation, this will also go to the town council in early May as well.
Right. Great, thank you, Tim. Do I have a motion to accept the resolution?
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to vote on Resolution 2019-02, resolution of the Speedway Redevelopment Commission approving an economic development strategic plan in its substantial form.
Thank you. I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Okay, I have a motion and a second on the resolution. Any further discussion or questions? All right, let's take it to a vote. All those in favor of the acceptance of Resolution 2019-02, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Motion passes 4-0. Thank you. Thank you again, Courtney. Appreciate that presentation.
We will eventually as well have the plan and on our website. We're working out some bugs on that right now, but we'll make sure when we have a final adopted plan that it is accessible.
Great. And I'm sure there'll be a hard copy available at the town annex for those individuals that might not have access to the internet. All right, let's go back to the previous project update on the 2500 North High School Road project, which does have an impact on our consideration for the resolution 2019-03. So, Tim, I'll turn that over to you.
Yeah, so everything's moving along out at 2500 High School Road. It's just it's a complex project, a little more complex than I think we anticipated at the beginning, just with additional property owners that we've been negotiating with, as well as one of the main prospects that we're looking at. We anticipated having an answer back. We're one of 4 sites being looked at. It's now sounding like it's going to be mid-May that we will hear back from that one, which is kind of the key direction of do we go left or right. We feel pretty good about it, but you just never know. There's 3 other quality sites being looked at as well in the area. So with that, along with the cell tower, we have requested they have additional property we're trying to acquire there. Those negotiations are going well. We started out very much on one side, and we feel we'll get to the compromise there. And then the Circle K in particular has been probably the most difficult. We're looking at swapping them land there, but it becomes more difficult when Part of that deal involves no further action letters. In the meantime, while those don't just happen overnight, it's going to take a little time. In the meantime, the key to the redevelopment is getting the infrastructure in place, which would go right through that site. So we're not sure. We have meetings set up with IDEM to see if can we start our infrastructure projects while we're waiting on a no further action cleanup for the site. So we're just trying to figure out some of those logistics that are linchpins to moving forward before everyone signs off on documents and starts spending some real money. From a town aspect, we want to see a couple of those letters of intent signed. We have some definite interest from some tenants, but we'd like to see those signed off before we start and move forward with the funding option, because getting to the bond's going to take us quite a bit of time. We have some timelines. I think I shared those with you. But we want to make sure before we start that process and get moving that we have a little bit of commitment to be able to pay that back. And then obviously we're also working with the land swap, some improvements with the El Rodeo side as well. We don't intend to buy them, but we're trying to work with them. They have some land we want. We think it's advantageous for them to swap some land as well. So we're making progress with all these. We don't see any big glitches at this point. It's just taking longer than anticipated, and it became a little more complicated with the IDEM issue as well. So the original EDA had contemplated a certain deadline. We had extended that prior, and we're requesting, neither side wants to come back and request any more extensions. We'd like to be pushing dirt by the end of summer. So we don't anticipate this going 90 days, but we wanted to be safe and extend it out to the end of July with an extension just to do our due diligence. We have actually already taken care of the purchase agreement. Positive news, the real last two documents we're looking at and we're starting to have discussions on are the covenants and restrictions. And there's actually, we'll need to have a discussion on what we actually want to see out there. We'll get a draft and kind of go over that. And then we also have the funding agreement. How will this work, money in, money out? We have seen the first drafts, and our attorneys are going back and forth to get that draft ready. So we feel confident we should have the final documents in draft form for review and discussion here real soon. We feel we should have agreements back. In fact, we received a draft version of the agreements with Circle K just today. They're no way final form yet, but it's progress towards the right direction. So with that said, that is the resolution before you, is requesting one more extension of the due diligence timeline until the end of July.
And I feel fairly confident that the due diligence can be completed successfully, and hopefully even prior to that date.
Everybody hopes prior.
Anybody have any questions of Tim regarding the requested extension? Well, then I will entertain a motion for the acceptance of Resolution 2019-03 by the Redevelopment Commission, which is an extension of time to execute the purchase agreement and supporting documents for our 2500 North High School project.
Mr. President, I move that we approve Resolution 2019-03, extending the time to execute a purchase agreement on the 2500 project.
All right, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, I've got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Questions? And then we'll take it to a vote. All those in favor of the acceptance of Resolution 2019-03 that has been presented to us, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstain? The motion passes 4-0. Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Tim. Appreciate that explanation. That was very good. All right, we have one old item of business that we need to discuss, and this involves kind of a joint request by, let's see, it is a request to utilize SRC-owned and controlled parking lots by the Old Tin Good Friends and Can Meats organization, which is kind of an interesting name, but essentially it is an organization that displays cars, antique cars, customized cars, and if everyone can recall, the previous events that may have occurred at the location where Bell Helmets is currently located. There was a car display, a car show, also associated with a social event that was held for a number of years but discontinued last year. So this is kind of an evolution of that. And this is an event that's also in conjunction with the Old Speedway Neighborhood Association, Old Speedway City Neighborhood Association, who last year held a nice barbecue right behind Barbecue and Bourbon in their new parking area. And members of the Speedway Neighborhood Association, brought covered dishes and desserts, et cetera, and Barbecue and Bourbon provided the meats for the event, and it was very well attended. I know the Speedway Police Department personnel, the Fire Department personnel were invited and thoroughly enjoyed, along with many other neighbors. So it's a neat event, and they have requested the use initially of our parking lot that is located at 1426 North Main, and that's that lot that is, between Taxback and Barbecue and Bourbon. Well, during the discussions that we had based on that request, staff had asked if the 1300 block would be sufficient to hold that event, because we're a little concerned about taking all of the public parking spaces away from, our restaurants and vendors along Main Street for that event, because they'd like to utilize the lots from 4 o'clock in the afternoon until about 11 o'clock at night. So Tim had many discussions with the organizer, and they feel that the 1300 block would be sufficient. So they have requested the use of that parking lot, and we had a previous discussion about uses of publicly owned parking lots for various organizations. I don't know that this is a formal organization, the old Tin Good Friends and Canned Meats organization, or whether it's a loosely aligned group of individuals that like to display cars. But I do know that the Old Speedway Neighborhood Association is a not-for-profit organization with a great mission. So I believe that the request is to utilize that lot for the event on June 1st, and there would be no associated fee for the use of that, at least not this year. I think we'd have to consider long-term the many requests that we do receive for the use of our publicly owned and controlled properties by various organizations, many of which have great missions, others of which may be somewhat profit-oriented, other may just be socially oriented. So I think that's an issue that we'll have to discuss, in the future. So I guess, the question is, will we approve the use of the 1300 parking area or portions of that for the Old Speedway City Neighborhood Association and the 10 Good Friends and Canned Meats organizations on June 1st for their collaborative event. So anybody have any concerns or
I have a question.
further questions?
How will cleanup be handled?
that is going to be a requirement of the Old Speedway Neighborhood Association and the organizers of the tin goods and canned meats and that group of individuals. I mean, that'll be a mandatory requirement, along with the requirement that, they provide adequate insurance coverage that also names the town of Speedway and the Speedway Redevelopment Commission as additional insureds. Anybody have any other concerns or questions?
So is this the same date as the Ashna picnic?
Yes, it is. It is the same, and it's actually the same timing.
Okay.
I don't know the actual arrangements or logistics of when cars are going to be brought in, when they'll set up possibly a tent and their tables for, the serving of the food and also the placement of the side dishes. But I plan on going.
Yeah, I feel it's easier to maintain and control, and we can block it off and not have as many concerns in 1300 block versus the 1400.
And that option was provided to the organizers, and they felt comfortable and that they found acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
So unless we have any further questions, and I guess I'll entertain a motion to accept the request for that combined event on the 1300 block on June 1st.
Mr. President, I'd like to make the motion to utilize the 1300 block parking lot for the Old Tin Good Friends and Canned Meats event on June 1st.
Well, that just came right off your tongue, didn't it?
I know, it doesn't even have a comma in there, but I was able to.
Well, we got a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. I think we've had quite enough discussion. Let's take it to a vote. All those in favor of accepting the request by both organizations, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Great. The event, that'll be June 1st for all of those individuals that would like to attend. All you need to bring is a covered dish and possibly a dessert. And you get a chance to, mingle with many of the neighbors. All right, that concludes our agenda item for our old business. We do have our director's report. Tim, I know you've mentioned quite a few things. Is there anything else you'd like to report this evening?
Yeah, just a couple positive announcements. One, the Courtyard by Marriott opened up officially last Friday, April 12th. They had about 40 bookings over the weekend. They're having a pretty steady interest at that spot. It's a beautiful location. It's the most modern design Courtyard has, obviously, and it's very impressive. They do have a bistro in there. I don't think it's quite open yet, but anybody can go in for breakfast, lunch, or I think it's breakfast and lunch for different items. So, and there's rental space available in there as well. So, meeting space, I should say. So there will be a formal ribbon cutting grand opening. I believe we're looking at May 2nd. More information will be sent out when it gets closer to that event, but we're excited to have that online and a place for people to stay in Speedway again. Another one, at the last town council meeting, we formally approved the tax abatement request for Allison Transmission. Allison Transmission is going to be building a new vehicle environmental testing facility, which is, there's very few in North America, and I think this is the only one in the Midwest that allows different groups, not just Allison, to change conditions and test material, and they can make it extremely cold or extremely hot, different type of environmental areas. So it's about $30 million total investment. We're really excited to see them expanding here in Speedway. And there's an expansion currently going on at Praxair Surface Technologies as well that we're excited about. So our largest employers are doing well and expanding, and we're excited about that. And then beyond that, we're just Gilman Street project should be started the end of the month. They got their final approval from the special hearing examiner, who always is very tough, and got them their approval, so we're hoping by the end of April they'll be breaking ground on that project as well. And we'll keep you posted on that. And besides that, Mr. Ramian and myself will be knee-deep in preparing for all our May festivities.
Great. Thank you very much for that update and that report. Before we adjourn, does anybody have any further announcements you'd like to make?
I have some event updates. This Thursday is the Taste of Speedway at Delara, 5:30 to 7:30. I think there's 40 booths. If you don't have your tickets yet, they're $10. You might want to stop in Three Sisters in a Trunk before Thursday, because I think it will sell out. This Saturday is the official grand opening for City Dogs. The owners are local. And May 8th is the Run Club and Bike Club Run or Bike with the Racer. It starts at Daredevil and will end at Big Woods this year.
Great.
That's what I got.
We sent out the parking lot info cards, correct?
Correct.
So if you're eating at any of the local restaurants, you may see an information card that has the new public parking where it's available.
Yes, the Wilshaw public parking is available. It's open. We'll sign it. Signage is up, but we'll be improving the signage. And there is a ticketing system that will be put in place hopefully by the end of the month. But in the meantime, feel free to just go in and park in the designated areas.
Gordon, anything? I did want to thank, the members of the Old Speedway City Neighborhood Association for their efforts over the weekend to clean up a lot of the areas in the old neighborhood area. A couple of dumpsters were placed, and Brody, I know you were involved with Allison, and, I would suspect that those dumpsters were pretty full, by the conclusion of the
Yep.
day. So a lot of people volunteered and really helped in cleaning the trails and some of the areas that trash just seems to collect over the winter months. So I did want to, thank that organization for their efforts. Then also, as always, please support our local Speedway businesses and industries and services. We have a lot to offer here in our small community. So unless anybody has any further items to discuss or reports, I will go ahead and adjourn the meeting by consent. And our next meeting is scheduled for May 20th, 2019 at 6 p.m. here in the Public Meeting Hall, and that is a Monday night. Thank you, everybody.